Lucas, a wealthy businessman, stood stunned at the altar as Natalie, his soon-to-be bride, confessed a secret that shattered everything he believed. As gasps filled the room and whispers spread like wildfire among the guests, he felt his world unraveling. How could he not have seen this coming? What was Natalie hiding all along? Stay tuned to find out the truth that could destroy their love or bring them closer than ever before. The wedding day, a moment that should have been filled with joy and celebration, quickly turned into a scene of chaos and disbelief. Lucas, standing at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, felt his heart drop. Natalie, his beautiful bride, with tears streaming down her face, had just revealed a secret she had kept hidden for so long. The weight of her confession hit him like a tidal wave, and he couldn't comprehend the gravity of her words. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but all he could feel was shock and betrayal. As the realization of her words sunk in, the room seemed to shrink around him. The murmur of the guests grew louder. A mix of gasps, whispers, and shocked exclamations filled the air. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances turned to each other, trying to process what had just happened. Lucas felt like he was in a nightmare, his world crumbling before his eyes, and he was powerless to stop it. How had he been so blind? How could he not have seen this coming? The woman he loved, the one he had chosen to spend his life with, had been hiding a part of herself from him. His thoughts raced back to all the moments they had shared, searching for clues, signs that might have hinted at this secret. But there were none, only memories of love and trust that now seemed tainted. The atmosphere in the room was tense, charged with uncertainty and fear. Natalie stood at the altar, her eyes pleading with Lucas to understand, to forgive her. She was exposed, vulnerable, and yet there was a strength in her stance, a determination to face the consequences of her revelation. She knew this moment could change everything, but she had to be honest, no matter the cost. The future of their love, their happiness, now hung in the balance. Would this truth destroy everything they had built together? Or could it be the foundation for something even stronger? The audience is left on edge, wondering what Lucas will do next. Will he find it in his heart to forgive? Or will this secret be the end of their love story? It all began on a rainy evening in the heart of New York City. Lucas, a wealthy businessman known for his charm and sharp wit, found himself in an upscale restaurant, seeking refuge from the storm outside. He was tired from a long day of meetings and was in desperate need of a comforting meal. As he sat down at a quiet corner table, his eyes wandered across the room, eventually landing on a young woman working as a waitress. She moved with grace, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders, her green eyes sparkling even in the dim light. From the moment he saw her, Lucas was captivated. There was something about her simplicity, her genuine smile, that immediately drew him in. She was different from the women he was accustomed to. No pretenses, no games. Natalie, with her slender frame and delicate features, had a quiet beauty that was hard to ignore. As she approached his table to take his order, he couldn't help but notice the kindness in her voice and the way she made every guest feel special. Natalie had noticed Lucas too, but she never expected a man like him to take an interest in her. She had seen his type before, wealthy, confident, often self-absorbed. But there was a softness in his eyes, a curiosity that seemed genuine. She tried to remain professional, keeping her interactions brief and polite. Yet there was a warmth that she couldn't hide. As they exchanged pleasantries, Lucas found himself intrigued, not just by her looks, but by the sense of calm she seemed to carry with her, even amidst the chaos of the bustling restaurant. As the evening went on, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that he had to get to know her better. He watched as she worked, noticing the small details. How she helped an elderly couple with their coats, how she laughed softly with the children at a nearby table. There was a natural grace in her actions, a kindness that was both rare and refreshing. It was in that moment, surrounded by the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, that he decided to take a chance. After dinner, as Natalie was clearing his table, Lucas finally spoke up, asking her out for a coffee after a shift. To his surprise and delight, she agreed, her eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and caution. That was the beginning of their story, a story that started with a chance encounter in a rainy restaurant and would soon unfold into a whirlwind romance. But neither of them could have predicted the twists and turns that lay ahead, nor the secrets that would soon come to light. Lucas and Natalie found themselves in a quiet corner of a bustling city park, their favorite place to escape the world and dream about their future. The crisp air around them seemed to amplify their voices as they discussed their plans, their hopes intertwining with every word. They spoke of a life together, ignoring the stark contrast of their backgrounds. Natalie's eyes sparkled with excitement as she shared her dreams, while Lucas, captivated by her spirit, felt a deep desire to make those dreams come true. As their conversation deepened, Lucas's face grew serious. He reached into his pocket, his heart racing with anticipation. Without a grand gesture, he proposed to Natalie right there, hoping that the simplicity of the moment would capture the depth of his feelings. Natalie looked stunned. She loved Lucas, but the reality of their different worlds began to weigh on her mind. Her hesitation was palpable. She didn't say no, but her uncertainty hung in the air, making Lucas question his approach. Later that evening, Lucas shared the news with Henry, his closest friend, over drinks at an upscale bar. Henry, a man with sharp gray eyes and a skeptical smile, listened carefully as Lucas recounted the proposal and Natalie's reaction. Henry's expression shifted to one of concern. He trusted Lucas, but he had always harbored doubts about Natalie's intentions. Henry warned Lucas, suggesting that Natalie might be more interested in his wealth than his love. Lucas tried to brush off Henry's concerns, but a seed of doubt began to take root. As days passed, the tension between Lucas and Natalie grew. He couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Henry was right, that perhaps he had moved too quickly, or that their differences were too significant to overcome. Natalie sensed his unease, and it made her question her own feelings. She loved Lucas, but was afraid of becoming someone she wasn't just to fit into his world. Despite their growing apprehensions, they continued to see each other, trying to ignore the doubts and the whispers that began to circle their relationship. Lucas wanted to believe in their love, to believe that it could conquer all the obstacles before them. But Henry's words kept echoing in his mind, casting a shadow over every moment they shared. The uncertainty was now a silent guest in every conversation, every glance. Henry, with his sharp instincts, had grown increasingly suspicious of Natalie's intentions. Unbeknownst to Lucas, he began digging into her past, determined to uncover any hidden truths. He spent hours online, sifting through records, social media profiles, and even reaching out to old acquaintances of hers. His face remained focused, his gray eyes narrowing as he uncovered small, inconsistent details that fueled his doubts further. Meanwhile, Natalie began to sense a shift in her surroundings. She noticed Henry's sudden interest in her past and felt a creeping anxiety she hadn't experienced before. Her usually calm demeanor began to crack. She would frequently glance over her shoulder, her hands trembling slightly when she thought no one was watching. Her once bright, confident expressions were now replaced by a subtle but unmistakable nervousness. Lucas, on the other hand, noticed these changes in Natalie. Her unease was palpable, and it worried him. He wondered if perhaps she was hiding something, or if the pressure of their growing relationship was getting to her. Still, his love for her clouded his judgment, making it hard for him to see beyond his own emotions. The tension between Lucas and Henry began to build as Henry continued his investigation. During a casual meeting at Lucas's office, Henry couldn't help but drop a few hints, suggesting that Natalie might not be who she seemed. Lucas, though initially dismissive, began to feel a knot of frustration and confusion tightening in his chest. He valued Henry's friendship, but he didn't want to believe there was anything wrong with Natalie. As Henry's insinuations became more frequent, Lucas found himself in a constant state of discomfort. He began avoiding discussions about Natalie with Henry, unwilling to let his friend's suspicions ruin what he hoped could be a beautiful future. But the seeds of doubt had already been planted, and Lucas could feel them slowly starting to grow. Margaret, Lucas's mother, had always been skeptical of Natalie. She invited Lucas over for tea, her piercing blue eyes watching him closely as she questioned his decision to date Natalie. She expressed concerns, suggesting that Natalie might not be suitable for their social circle, pointing out how little they knew about her past. Her words were carefully chosen, but her tone carried a sharpness that Lucas couldn't ignore. Natalie, on the other hand, was struggling to adjust to the expectations of Lucas's affluent family. At a formal family event, she felt the weight of judgment from the wealthy guests around her. Her posture stiffened, and her smile became more strained as she tried to navigate the conversations, sensing the whispers and stares from those who doubted her intentions. The tension reached its peak when Margaret, in a moment of boldness, confronted Natalie directly during the event. She questioned Natalie's motives, asking pointedly about her background and what she really wanted with Lucas. The room fell silent, and Natalie's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. She tried to remain composed, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she defended herself against Margaret's insinuations. Lucas, caught in the middle, felt a deep conflict growing inside him. He loved his mother, but he also cared deeply for Natalie. As the confrontation unfolded, he felt a surge of frustration. He wanted to protect Natalie, but was also aware of the societal pressures that came with his family's status. The murmurs among the guests only added to his internal turmoil, as he realized that the high society of New York was beginning to speculate about his relationship with Natalie. As the evening progressed, it became clear that their relationship was becoming the talk of the town. Gossip spread quickly among the socialites, with everyone having their own theory about why Lucas, a prominent figure, would be involved with someone like Natalie. The mounting pressure from his family and society weighed heavily on Lucas's shoulders, leaving him to question his own choices. Lucas, deeply entangled in the personal turmoil surrounding his relationship with Natalie and the disapproval of his mother, Margaret, found himself distracted at a critical business meeting. His thoughts were elsewhere, weighed down by the emotional tension and societal expectations. This distraction led him to miss crucial details, resulting in the loss of a significant deal. The impact was immediate. His associates were visibly disappointed, and Lucas felt a sinking feeling as he realized the consequences of his divided attention. Meanwhile, Natalie faced her own set of challenges. At the upscale restaurant where she worked, her hours were unexpectedly cut, and with fewer shifts, her income from tips dwindled. She found herself struggling to manage her finances, a stark contrast to the world of wealth she had glimpsed through Lucas. Her frustration grew as she dealt with customers who seemed to sense her distraction, leaving smaller tips. The financial strain began to weigh heavily on her, adding to the stress of her uncertain relationship with Lucas. Sensing an opportunity, Henry approached Lucas with a proposition. He used the recent financial setback as leverage, subtly suggesting that Lucas reconsider his relationship with Natalie and the idea of marriage. Henry's tone was calm but firm, his words carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt. He pointed out how Lucas's focus on his personal life was beginning to affect his professional standing, hinting that perhaps it was time to realign his priorities. The suggestion left Lucas in a quandary, torn between his loyalty to Natalie and the practical concerns raised by his friend. A shadow from Natalie's past unexpectedly re-emerged in her life, bringing with it the threat of exposure. An old acquaintance, a man with a grudge, appeared at the restaurant where she worked. His presence was unsettling, and his intentions were clear. He hinted at secrets that Natalie had buried long ago, secrets that could disrupt her current life with Lucas. Natalie felt her heart race as he made vague threats about revealing what he knew. She tried to maintain her composure, but the fear of what could be unleashed made her hands tremble. Determined to keep her past hidden, Natalie became more secretive, trying to shield Lucas from any hint of her previous life. She avoided his probing questions, and her behavior became more erratic. Lucas, caught between his growing love for her and the emerging doubts planted by others, especially Henry, found himself torn. Henry, noticing Natalie's discomfort and Lucas's uncertainty, continued to apply pressure. He confronted Natalie directly, suggesting he might know more than he let on. Natalie's silence and evasive responses only fueled his suspicions further, adding to the tension. Lucas was caught in a difficult position, wanting to trust Natalie, but feeling increasingly overwhelmed by the uncertainty surrounding her. He began to notice inconsistencies in her stories and hesitations in her words. Each day, he felt the conflict between his desire to believe in her and the growing evidence suggesting she was hiding something. His mind was clouded with confusion and mistrust, making it harder to distinguish between truth and deception. The weight of these doubts began to strain their relationship, leaving Lucas on the verge of a painful decision. Lucas sat alone in his study, his mind clouded with uncertainty. He had always been so sure about his decision to marry Natalie, but now doubts crept in like a slow-moving fog. He replayed every conversation, every look, searching for signs he might have missed. The thought of Natalie hiding something from him gnawed at his trust. His feelings for her were genuine, but the fear of being deceived began to overshadow his love. He questioned if he was making a mistake, if rushing into marriage was the right choice. His internal struggle was evident as he stared blankly at the walls, trying to silence the conflicting voices in his head. Meanwhile, Natalie was in her small apartment, pacing back and forth, overwhelmed by guilt and fear. She knew she was on the brink of losing everything she had worked so hard to build with Lucas. The past she had tried so desperately to leave behind seemed to resurface, threatening to destroy the fragile trust between them. Her mind raced with scenarios of what could happen if Lucas found out the truth. She feared his reaction, feared losing the love she had come to cherish. The weight of her secrets became unbearable, and tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered to herself, questioning her decisions and wondering if honesty could save a relationship or doom it entirely. Both Lucas and Natalie were caught in a web of their own thoughts, each struggling with their fears and insecurities. Lucas's desire to confront Natalie grew, but he feared pushing her away with his suspicions. Natalie wanted to confide in Lucas, to be honest about her past, but the fear of rejection held her back. They were two souls trapped in a dance of doubt and silence, each afraid to make a move that could break what they had. The tension between what they wanted to say and what they were afraid to reveal was almost palpable, leaving their relationship hanging by a thread. Olivia, a close friend of Natalie, sensed her distress and decided to reach out. Meeting at a quiet cafe, Olivia listened intently as Natalie poured out her fears and anxieties. She could see the burden weighing on Natalie's shoulders, the fear of losing Lucas if the truth came to light. Olivia, always a voice of reason, suggested that Natalie should be honest with Lucas. She believed that only through truth could they build a stronger foundation for their future together. She encouraged Natalie to trust in Lucas's love and face the situation with courage, knowing that hiding secrets would only make things worse. Natalie, however, was torn. She appreciated Olivia's advice but feared the consequences. What if Lucas couldn't forgive her? What if her honesty shattered the trust between them beyond repair? She had worked so hard to build a new life, and the thought of losing everything was paralyzing. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts as she tried to weigh Olivia's words against her own fears. She looked at Olivia, her eyes filled with uncertainty, wondering if there was a way to confess without losing Lucas. Olivia, noticing her hesitation, gently reassured her, offering to help mediate the situation, suggesting that perhaps a calm, honest conversation could heal the rift. Determined to support her friend, Olivia arranged a small gathering at her place, inviting both Natalie and Lucas. She hoped that in a neutral setting, they could open up to each other. Olivia tried to create a peaceful atmosphere, lighting candles and playing soft music to ease the tension. She stood by, ready to step in if needed, hoping her presence would provide a sense of security for both of them. As Lucas arrived, the air was thick with anticipation. Natalie's heart raced, knowing this might be her last chance to come clean. She looked at Lucas, seeing the confusion in his eyes, and knew that the moment of truth was near. Lucas and Natalie, overwhelmed by the pressures of their lives, decided they needed a break. They agreed that taking a vacation together could be the reset they desperately needed. They chose a secluded beach destination, far from the judging eyes of society and the constant demands of their social circles. As they arrived, the fresh sea breeze and the sound of the waves offered a sense of calm they hadn't felt in months. Natalie felt a glimmer of hope as she watched Lucas relax for the first time in what seemed like forever. Maybe this was the fresh start they both needed, away from the expectations that had been weighing them down. During their time on the beach, they started planning a new life together, one that didn't revolve around the high expectations of their world. They dreamed of a simpler, more genuine existence, where they could focus on their relationship without outside interference. They spoke of finding a small home, perhaps near the ocean, where they could live a quieter, more fulfilling life. As they talked, the tension between them seemed to ease. They began to reconnect, finding joy in the small moments. A shared laugh, a quiet sunset walk, or the warmth of a bonfire under the stars. It was as if the love they once knew was finding its way back to the surface. In these peaceful surroundings, they began to see each other in a new light. Lucas found himself admiring Natalie's resilience, her ability to hope despite everything. Natalie, in turn, saw Lucas's strength and his desire to protect what they had. Moments of vulnerability were shared, secrets and fears laid bare. They realized that, despite the challenges ahead, they still had a chance to build something beautiful together. As their vacation drew to a close, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were determined to return to their lives with a new strategy, one that prioritized their happiness and the love they had rediscovered. While enjoying a peaceful morning at a local cafe, Natalie unexpectedly encounters someone from her past who knows about her secret. A moment of shock freezes her, and she feels her heart race as she recognizes the person. Trying to maintain her composure, she engages in a brief conversation, but the tension is evident. She worries about what this encounter might mean and if Lucas will find out. Despite her best efforts to remain calm, her unease is clear. Lucas, sitting a few tables away, notices the strained exchange and becomes suspicious. His relaxed demeanor begins to shift, and doubt starts creeping into his mind once more. As the day progresses, Lucas's suspicions grow. He can't shake off the feeling that something is amiss. Later, as they walk along the beach, he confronts Natalie about the earlier encounter. His tone is hesitant but firm, and his eyes search hers for answers. Natalie tries to deflect, insisting it was just a coincidence, but Lucas senses her discomfort. The trust they had started to rebuild feels fragile, and a familiar fear grips him. He presses further, and Natalie, feeling cornered, reveals only a partial truth, hoping it will satisfy him. Yet, her reluctance only fuels his doubts. The tension between them reaches a peak that evening. They sit in their hotel room, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Lucas, feeling betrayed once again, struggles to understand why Natalie isn't being fully honest. His voice breaks as he questions her sincerity, and Natalie, overwhelmed by guilt and fear of losing him, finally confesses the truth. The revelation shatters the temporary peace they had found, creating a deep rift between them. For a moment, it seems their fragile hope for a fresh start might be lost. Lucas receives an anonymous letter, the words etched sharply across the paper, revealing the full extent of Natalie's lies. His hands tremble as he reads, his heart sinking with every line. It becomes clear that what he thought was just a small misunderstanding is something much deeper and more deceptive. The letter details events and secrets that Natalie has hidden, shattering the trust they had barely begun to rebuild. The pain of betrayal cuts through him, leaving him feeling both furious and heartbroken. He feels a surge of anger, the need for answers burning inside him, and he decides he cannot stay silent any longer. Later that evening, Lucas confronts Natalie with the letter. His voice is tense, filled with a mix of hurt and rage as he demands the truth. Natalie's face pales as she realizes what he's holding. She tries to explain, her voice breaking, but Lucas is relentless. The confrontation escalates, with each word becoming a sharp blade, cutting deeper into their already fragile relationship. Tears stream down Natalie's face as she pleads for understanding, but Lucas feels numb, his trust in her completely shattered. The room feels suffocating with the weight of their emotions, each second stretching into an eternity. The final blow comes when Lucas tells Natalie she has to leave. His tone is cold, his eyes filled with a sense of finality. Natalie, devastated and defeated, gathers her belongings with trembling hands. As she steps out of the apartment, a wave of loneliness washes over her. She looks back one last time, hoping for a sign of forgiveness, but Lucas turns away. The door closes behind her, leaving her alone in the cold night, feeling the sting of her choices and the pain of their broken bond. Natalie finds herself alone in a small, run-down motel room. The dim light from a single bulb flickers, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. She sits on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she holds her head. Her reflection in the dusty mirror across the room reveals a woman who seems to have aged overnight. The weight of her choices presses down on her, and for the first time, she feels the full brunt of her solitude and the consequences of her actions. Tears roll down her cheeks as she thinks about the life she once had and the trust she shattered. With no money and nowhere to go, she feels trapped in her own despair, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have been. The loneliness becomes a cold presence in the room, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Meanwhile, Lucas, sitting alone in his luxurious penthouse, stares blankly at the city skyline through the large windows. The view that once brought him peace now feels like a constant reminder of his isolation. He clenches his jaw, fighting back the tears of frustration and anger. He's cut himself off from friends and family, unable to face their questions or their pity. His mind replays every moment with Natalie, every smile, every lie, over and over like a tormenting loop. He feels betrayed not just by her, but by his own heart for letting her in. The once vibrant man now feels hollow, consumed by his own thoughts and regrets. The silence in the room is deafening, only broken by his shallow breaths. Both Lucas and Natalie are at their lowest points. Natalie, curled up on the motel bed, tries to find solace in sleep. But every time she closes her eyes, she is haunted by memories of Lucas and the life they planned together. Lucas, on the other hand, paces his penthouse, each step heavy with sorrow. Both are consumed by their thoughts, each believing they are to blame for the situation they are in. They are lost, searching for answers in the darkness that surrounds them, unsure if they will ever find a way back to each other or themselves. Margaret, a woman in her late 50s with an air of wisdom and grace, had been silently observing Natalie for some time. She sensed something different about her, a hidden depth that didn't match the surface of her current situation. Driven by a curiosity she couldn't ignore, Margaret decided to dig deeper into Natalie's past. After a few discreet inquiries, she stumbled upon a revelation that left her both shocked and intrigued. Natalie had not always been in the dire straits she found herself in now. She had come from wealth, a life of privilege that was worlds apart from where she stood today. This discovery sparked something in Margaret, a desire to understand the full story behind Natalie's fall from grace. One afternoon, Margaret approaches Natalie at a small cafe where she had seen her often. Her approach is cautious yet warm. She sits down across from Natalie, her eyes filled with both concern and curiosity. Natalie is taken aback at first, unsure of what to make of this unexpected interaction. Margaret gently begins to ask questions, not prying, but inviting Natalie to share her story. At first, Natalie hesitates, her eyes darting away. But there is something comforting about Margaret's presence. Slowly, she begins to open up, the walls she had built around herself starting to crumble. She speaks of a life once filled with luxury, the expectations, and the choices that led her to where she is now. As she talks, a sense of relief washes over her, like a heavy burden finally lifting. Margaret listens intently, her expression a mix of empathy and understanding. She realizes that beneath the surface of Natalie's current struggles lies a story of strength and resilience, of a woman who had lost everything but still managed to keep going. Natalie reveals the betrayal that cost her everything, the trust she placed in someone who exploited her vulnerabilities. As she speaks, Margaret feels a strong urge to help, to offer the support that Natalie has been so desperately lacking. She knows now that this meeting is not by chance, but perhaps a sign that both their paths were meant to cross. Margaret's heart is moved, and she decides to become an ally, sensing that together, they might find a way out of this darkness. Lucas sits alone in his luxurious penthouse, the weight of his recent decisions pressing heavily on his shoulders. His conversation with his mother still echoes in his mind, her wise words cutting through his confusion. She had gently reminded him of the importance of love and understanding, encouraging him to look beyond his pride and anger. Slowly, Lucas begins to see the truth in her advice. He realizes that his feelings for Natalie are still strong, buried under layers of hurt and misunderstanding. He starts to question his actions, wondering if he had been too harsh, too quick to judge. A spark of hope ignites within him, the idea of reconciliation taking root in his thoughts. Meanwhile, Natalie, determined to move forward, begins to explore ways to rebuild her life without Lucas. She visits job boards, applies for positions, and networks with old contacts. Her face reflects both determination and vulnerability, a stark contrast to her once confident demeanor. The journey is challenging, and doubt occasionally creeps in, but she pushes forward, fueled by a desire to reclaim her independence and self-worth. She knows it won't be easy, but she is committed to creating a new path for herself, free from the shadows of her past. Every step she takes is a step toward a new beginning, even if the road ahead is uncertain. Observing Lucas's struggle, Henry begins to see the situation in a new light. He notices the toll it is taking on Lucas, the sadness that lingers in his eyes. Henry, who had always been pragmatic and somewhat detached, starts to rethink his stance. He realizes that his friend's suffering is deeper than he had imagined, and it stirs something in him. Henry begins to question his own behavior, his tendency to push Lucas toward a path of resentment. Maybe there is a different way to approach this, one that could bring healing instead of further division. The thought lingers, growing stronger, as he contemplates how he might help Lucas find his way back to the person he truly wants to be. Olivia, having observed Lucas's increasing bitterness, decides to confront him directly. She approaches him with a mix of concern and frustration, her voice firm yet caring. She questions his harsh treatment of Natalie, pointing out how his anger seems to be consuming him and pushing everyone away. Lucas, taken aback by her words, tries to defend himself, but Olivia's piercing gaze and unwavering stance make it clear that she is disappointed. Her disappointment cuts deep, and for the first time, Lucas feels a pang of guilt, realizing that his behavior might be more destructive than he had thought. Olivia turns away, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts, the seed of doubt now planted firmly in his mind. As Lucas's bitterness grows, his circle of allies begins to dwindle. Friends who once stood by his side now start to distance themselves, unable to bear his constant negativity and anger. The conversations that were once light and filled with camaraderie become tense and strained. He feels the shift but doesn't know how to stop it. Instead of reaching out, he retreats further into his solitude, his isolation becoming more profound with each passing day. He can sense that he is losing more than just friends. He is losing the respect and support of those he once considered close, and this realization slowly begins to weigh on him. At her new job, Natalie faces her own set of challenges. Her colleagues, initially welcoming, begin to lose faith in her abilities after a few setbacks. She struggles to keep up with the demands of the job, her confidence wavering. Whispers of doubt and skepticism fill the office, and Natalie feels the weight of judgment on her shoulders. She knows she needs to prove herself, but each mistake only adds to the pressure, making her feel more isolated. Despite her efforts to connect and rebuild, she senses a growing distance between her and her peers, making her path to redemption even more arduous. Lucas sits alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the luxury that once brought him comfort, but now feels strangely hollow. He begins to reflect on his recent actions and decisions, questioning the path that led him here. The faces of those he has pushed away flash before his mind, and he realizes how his bitterness has isolated him. Determined to find clarity, he reaches out to his mentor, an older, wiser figure who has guided him through difficult times before. The mentor listens patiently as Lucas pours out his frustrations and regrets. With a gentle but firm voice, the mentor reminds Lucas of the importance of humility and forgiveness, urging him to consider a path of reconciliation rather than resentment. Meanwhile, Natalie sits in a quiet corner of her modest apartment, contemplating her future. The idea of returning to her wealthy family crosses her mind, a family that had cut ties with her when she chose a different path. The thought of reopening old wounds and facing past judgment weighs heavily on her. She knows that reaching out could mean financial stability and a sense of security, but it could also mean sacrificing the independence she has fought so hard to build. She hesitates, caught between the desire for comfort and the fear of losing herself again. The inner turmoil is evident in her eyes as she weighs her options, each one fraught with its own set of consequences. Both Lucas and Natalie, though miles apart, find themselves grappling with similar thoughts. They are both at a crossroads, uncertain of which way to turn. Lucas considers his mentor's advice, wondering if he has the strength to make amends and rebuild the bridges he has burned. Natalie, on the other hand, reflects on her journey, debating whether to seek the familiar embrace of her family or continue forging her own path, even if it is filled with challenges. As they each ponder their next steps, a sense of quiet determination begins to emerge, suggesting that perhaps, in facing their pasts, they might find a new way forward. In a moment of reflection, Natalie finds herself recalling fragments of her past. Flashbacks begin to reveal small but significant details that had been overlooked. Moments when she chose integrity over comfort, instances where she put others before herself despite the cost. These memories are tinged with both pain and pride, painting a picture of someone who has always been caught between two worlds. As these memories resurface, she starts to see a pattern she hadn't noticed before, a series of choices that, while small on their own, weave together a tapestry of resilience and hidden strength. Meanwhile, Lucas sits at his desk, sifting through documents and old correspondence. As he meticulously examines every detail, he begins to connect the dots about Natalie's true character. Her actions, once dismissed as mere defiance or stubbornness, now appear in a new light, each one a deliberate move that speaks of a deeper purpose and conviction. He recalls conversations, small gestures, and moments that had seemed insignificant but now stand out with renewed clarity. He starts to see her not as an adversary, but as a person with layers of complexity, someone who has been navigating her own struggles all along. In another part of the city, Olivia stumbles upon a piece of information that could change everything. While looking through some old files, she finds a document that hints at a connection between Natalie and a significant figure from their past, a detail that had been buried and forgotten. This discovery, though seemingly minor, has the potential to shift the entire course of events. Olivia realizes the weight of what she has uncovered and knows she must act quickly before the truth is buried again. This newfound knowledge could either bring them all closer to a resolution or push them further into chaos, depending on how they choose to use it. Lucas and Natalie find themselves at a breaking point, their relationship strained beyond recognition. The tension between them is palpable, their words cutting like knives. Each blames the other for the mess they are in, and old wounds are reopened, bleeding fresh pain into their already complicated dynamic. The air is thick with unspoken resentment and regret, and for a moment, it seems as if there is no path forward for them. Natalie's eyes, usually full of determination, now look tired and defeated. Lucas, once a picture of strength, now seems lost, his confidence shattered. They are standing on the precipice, each step threatening to pull them further apart. Just as they begin to confront their deepest fears, a disaster strikes. An unforeseen event unfolds, something that neither could have predicted, throwing their world into chaos. The news comes like a hammer blow. An investment goes wrong, or a scandal erupts that threatens everything they have worked for. The room feels as if it's closing in around them, their hopes and dreams crumbling like sandcastles under a relentless tide. Desperation fills their hearts as they realize the magnitude of their situation. Everything they have built together, every sacrifice, every hard-earned victory, seems to vanish in an instant. The weight of failure is almost too much to bear, and it is unclear if they will find the strength to recover. The atmosphere reaches its boiling point, and emotions explode. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all comes to a head in a raw, emotional confrontation. Lucas and Natalie are pushed to their limits, their voices raised, their hearts aching. Tears fall, words are exchanged that can never be taken back, and the damage seems irreparable. This is the climax of their crisis, a moment where everything seems lost, and the audience is left wondering if they will ever find a way to reconcile. The tension is unbearable, and there is a sense of hopelessness that hangs in the air, leaving everyone questioning if there could possibly be a way out of this darkness. Lucas finds himself alone in his study, sifting through old documents and files. His frustration and confusion grow with each passing minute, feeling as though he's grasping at straws to make sense of everything that has happened. As he flips through a stack of papers, a yellowed envelope falls out, almost unnoticed. His breath catches when he sees it, a letter addressed to him in Natalie's handwriting. His hands tremble slightly as he opens it, the paper inside worn with age. The words begin to reveal a truth that Lucas never expected, a narrative that shatters his previous perceptions. The letter explains her actions were never out of malice, but a desperate attempt to protect him from a looming threat he was unaware of. Her sacrifices, her cold demeanor, were all a facade to keep him and the company safe from a hidden enemy. The letter goes on to describe how Natalie had uncovered a plot by a powerful adversary to take down Lucas and his business. She had known that if Lucas was aware, he would confront the threat head-on, risking everything in a battle he couldn't win. To shield him, she had taken steps to mislead everyone, including Lucas, to divert suspicion away from him and toward herself. Every move she made, every word spoken in anger or coldness, was part of a greater strategy to protect him from a dangerous opponent. Lucas's eyes widen as he reads about the lengths she went to, the dangers she faced alone, and how deeply she cared for him despite the walls she had built around herself. It was never about betrayal. It was about love, sacrifice, and protection. The pieces begin to fall into place, and Lucas feels a rush of emotions, a mix of regret, relief, and overwhelming gratitude. In the final lines of the letter, Natalie expresses her hope that Lucas will one day understand her actions and forgive her for the pain she caused. She ends the letter with a promise. If he is reading this, it means the threat has been neutralized and he is safe. Tears well up in Lucas's eyes as he folds the letter carefully, his heart heavy with a newfound understanding. He realizes now that Natalie was not his enemy, but his guardian, willing to bear the burden of misunderstanding and hatred to keep him safe. The scene closes with Lucas standing by the window, looking out at the city below, his expression filled with determination. He knows what he must do next: find Natalie, make amends, and start anew. The audience is left with a sense of hope and anticipation for what lies ahead, as the story's threads finally come together in a resolution that feels both surprising and deeply satisfying. Lucas stands in front of the luxurious penthouse where it all began, waiting for Natalie. The air is heavy with anticipation, the weight of everything they've been through bearing down on him. When Natalie finally arrives, there's a moment of silence as they face each other, both uncertain of what to say. But the letter he found, the truth it revealed, has changed everything. With a deep breath, Lucas steps forward, taking her hands in his. He speaks softly, telling her how much he now understands, how he regrets doubting her, and how grateful he is for everything she did to protect him. Natalie, with tears brimming in her eyes, apologizes for the pain her actions caused, explaining that she never wanted to hurt him, but felt she had no other choice. They both realized that their love, though tested, is stronger than the obstacles they faced. Together, they agree to put the past behind them and move forward, hand in hand, to rebuild their lives and their relationship. This moment of reconciliation is the turning point they've both been yearning for, a new beginning that promises hope and happiness. Just as the tension begins to dissolve, Henry appears, looking hesitant and remorseful. He approaches them cautiously, his usual confident demeanor replaced with vulnerability. He admits his mistakes, acknowledging how his actions were driven by misguided intentions and how he failed to see the truth of Natalie's sacrifices. Lucas and Natalie listen in silence, their emotions a mix of anger, sorrow, and empathy. But in this moment of truth, they all recognize that holding on to resentment will only hinder their paths forward. Lucas, with Natalie's silent support, offers forgiveness. Henry, overwhelmed with relief, vows to make amends and rebuild the trust he had shattered. The three of them, once torn apart by secrets and misunderstandings, now stand united, ready to face whatever the future holds. It's a moment of closure, but also one of new beginnings, where past grievances are laid to rest and the bonds between them are reforged, stronger than before. Years later, we catch a glimpse into the lives of Lucas, Natalie, and Henry. They've come a long way from the turmoil that once threatened to tear them apart. Lucas and Natalie have not only rebuilt their relationship, but have also grown their business, turning it into a thriving empire that reflects their shared vision and determination. Their love has deepened, rooted in the trust and understanding they fought so hard to regain. Henry, true to his word, has become a close friend and business partner, his previous mistakes a distant memory as he works tirelessly to support their joint endeavors. The video closes with a serene image of the three of them together at a charity event, smiling and content, a picture of success and happiness. Their journey, once filled with challenges and heartache, has led them to a place of peace and fulfillment, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the strength to start anew.
This story really touched me, showing how love and forgiveness can guide us even through the toughest times. What do you think about it? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're curious about more unforgettable tales, click on the video on your screen. See you soon.